Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Shelley Zalis is an internationally renowned thought leader, movement maker, and champion of equality. As the CEO of the Female Quotient, she works with Fortune 500 companies and impact organizations to advance equality in the workplace. I was shocked when I learned that it would take 99.5 years to eliminate global gender equality at the current rate of progress. We discuss ways they are working to bridge the gap for gender pay equity and leadership roles. I was fascinated to hear about Shelley's journey through corporate America and how she has been a pioneer in so many fields. Her philosophies on life resonated with me deeply. Learn more about the power of the pack and moments that matter in this episode with Shelley Zalis. I'm loving these conversations and hope you are too. If you are, please rate my podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to support with a donation, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com/sifumimichan. You can donate as little as $1 per month, and I would certainly appreciate it. For comments or suggestions, email me at sifumimichan@gmail.com or reach out on social media at sifumimichan. Now on with the show. Hello, Shelley. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
So excited to be here.
Yes. Well, I am a huge admirer of all the work and all of the amazing things that you do. And of course, I started following the Female Quotient, and that's how I got to know who you are. And I just see that you're just traveling the world right now. Very, very busy. Things are a little crazy now that travel's back on.
Well, it's really amazing. I just came back from France, and it's as if COVID doesn't even exist. Everything was open. People were out and about eating lots of bread. The bread in France is so good. And
I know.
3 meals a day, 3 baguettes a day. It's like, it's not fattening.
No, not at all. I am with you when I've been fortunate enough to travel as well. And I told people I could just live off like a baguette with butter or a little cheese, and I'm good. And wine, of course, especially in France. Oh my goodness. Well, that's amazing. And how was the traveling climate? I mean, I'm curious because I haven't gotten on a plane yet, and I have my first trip in September. And what's it like out there?
You know what? I mean, traveling with a mask, from LA to Paris. I mean, listen, no complaints. It was amazing, but it's hard. Mm-hmm. But now with the Delta variant, I mean, I got back in time, but now I hear they're starting to close things down because Europe is, a little scary. I just hope that it is not as bad as they think it might be. So right. I hope it comes and goes and it's not what, the panic that is anticipated. So, but it was really quite remarkable. I was in Paris for Generation Equality from UN Women, which was remarkable, really leading the action coalitions for the care economy, the digital divide, and also feminist leadership, and bringing the world together, uniting on actions, not commitments, not the pledges and the commitments for what we say we're going to do, but actually creating the action steps forward. After the Beijing commitments, human rights are women's rights, women's rights are human rights. And Pumzili, the executive director of UN Women, who actually it was her last week of being the ED. She just retired and is now going to really give her life to education, starting in Africa for girls. So it was a very historic moment 25 years later after Beijing, taking it to the next level with Generation Equality. And what she talked about was 1/4 is not equal. Mm-hmm. We talk about, making a lot of progress to 1/4, but 1/4 is not equal. A quarter is not enough. Equal is equal. 1/4 is not equal. And so we have work to do. And we do need to take those action steps. So we have stepped up with our action, leading the action coalitions around, those 3 areas of the care economy, the digital divide, which is enormous, and feminist leadership.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I definitely want to dive into all of that. And I was on the site, and one of the things that just really popped out to me was the 99.5 years to eliminate the gender gap. And that just thought to me was like, wow, I guess I won't see that. And it was really depressing, to be honest. Can you talk a little bit about what that actually means and kind of really break that down for our listeners, understanding what the gender gap is and why it will take such a long time at the rate we're going?
Yeah. I mean, and so I think this is really the big problem is we have been going backwards. And that's why it's so frustrating, because we've all been making pledges and commitments to closing the gaps. And yet we've been going backwards. Why? Because we're all doing the same thing separately. And so unless we really unite and work on the road to equality together, we're better together. We go further, we go faster when we unite and take the stand towards actions forward together. We are going to go backwards. And especially with COVID, we have set ourselves backwards. So according to the World Economic Forum, it will take over 99.5 years to reach gender parity in the C-suite, so leadership. And that's why feminist leadership is so incredibly important. And according to the World Economic Forum, pre-COVID, it will take over 257 years to realize pay equity.
Wow.
257 years. Since COVID, we've added over 25 years. So we've added an additional 25 years to the mix, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And so when you look at all of this, it really does come down to the care economy. And, we talk a lot about unpaid, the invisible hours of the unpaid work, which is care. Mm-hmm. And this is really where we have a lot of issues. When you look at, the workplace, so many women have opted out of the workforce because of caregiving challenges. We start 50-50 in the workplace. We end at less than 17% in the C-suite. We fall off in middle management, which is the messy middle, which is what we call it, because women just can't do it all. We can't take care of our children and also our jobs at the same time. And, it really is a challenge. And with COVID, yes, does it sound good that we can stay at home and do our jobs? Well, what about Zoom schooling? Who's taking care of kids? Caregiving is still predominantly a female issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean,
these are really the challenges. And, flexible work hours, that sounds good, but how are you going to be on Zoom working all day, but also who's feeding the kids? Who's taking care of the kids? Who's taking care of the kids, schooling needs on Zoom? These become really big challenges, the invisible hours, that you put into childcare.
Yeah. And that what you just described is I teach martial arts. And so, of course, I work with a lot of children and parents, and there's just the nightmares that I've heard of how difficult this last year has been with the Zoom and the virtual school, and having to basically become teachers themselves, in addition to, like you said, either trying to maintain their job or just giving it up altogether. And now that we were having this discussion, it really does outline what an impact COVID's had. And I'm actually not great at statistics or anything like that, but I'm willing to believe, like, as we go forward, that those numbers are only going to get worse, because there's no solutions that have come up yet. And hopefully with the kids going back to school, that will help. But I'd like to talk a little bit about even just the word feminism. I get a lot of discussions. I have a lot of people on this podcast. I consider myself to be a feminist, but it's interesting that word really sets people off in terms of even just men and women. There's just such a connotation. And I've tried to describe it, but I would love to hear from you, how you define feminism to people and what the misconceptions are, because I feel like it can be very divisive and very controversial.
I think words matter, and we need a new lexicon. And so I always say feminism 1.0, Gloria Steinem. I call it she for she. Gloria doesn't, but I think it's women supporting other women. Mm-hmm. Feminism 2.0, UN Women came up with he for she. We put men into the conversation, but he for she means men for women. But we all know that gender equality is not a female issue. It's a social and economic issue. It's a human issue. Women did not create the challenge. So what the female quotient says feminism 3.0 is we for we. We are all in this together. And so it's really the redefinition of feminism. So we put the word men in feminism instead of spelling it Feminism. We spell it Femenism. Modern feminism must include men. We are all in this together. Just like I don't call it, maternity leave. I say it's caregiving. And caregiving by default is still predominantly a female issue. Or I hate the word male allies. We don't need male allies. We're just giving men more power by saying, oh, men, we need your help. It's a leadership. We need leadership allies. Leadership by default is still predominantly men. And so language matters a lot in how we also create the solutions for change. And so when we talk about feminine, it's not the male or the female. It's about the feminine qualities of leadership, empathy, compassion, passion, resilience, collaborative. Like these are all the greatest qualities of leaders today. And yet we are reinforcing the control and command qualities of leadership versus the soft qualities of leadership that we know are what it takes today to create the culture of care that is what we need to flip the dynamics of the workplace that will go a long way to creating the culture that will allow everyone to thrive and bring their best self, their true self, their whole self to the table, especially primary caregivers that we are losing to the workplace and that we are losing to the leadership that we need to create the best workplace, the best workforce in the world.
Yeah, 100%. That was a fantastic definition, by the way. And I really appreciate that breakdown because it does take us through what is known to be modern times in progress, because things and definitions change and words change and things that weren't politically correct or acceptable, like we evolve, right? And so it's okay that I think that these terminologies have to change, but then I feel like the issue or the challenge is the education part, right? Because there are so many people that don't know about all of these different evolutions of how inclusive we as women and we as leaders that are trying to be. What do you feel, other than, of course, the great work you're doing through the Female Quotient and social media, what do you feel is a great way to kind of get that information out, other than taking all of your time doing so many podcasts? I see you on lots of Instagram lives. I see you out there spreading the word, but what more can maybe we all be doing to help with that? And then what, perhaps organizations should we be following to kind of keep in tune with and be aware of what's happening and stay educated?
It's really funny. As you were speaking, I was thinking, if we actually designed the workplace for I don't want to say the lowest common denominator, but for the highest common denominator, for the individual with the most common needs, which is the working mom. If we actually designed the workplace for the working mom, which means the highest need of flexibility, if we designed the workplace with the highest flexibility, we would actually develop the workplace for everyone, right? Because then it would work for everyone. If we developed the workplace for the ones that needed the most flexibility, the ones that needed the least flexibility would be the most accommodated, obviously. They'd be like, woo, I got so much free time on my hands. I could be so incredibly productive. But it would work for everyone, right? So I just was thinking about that. That's such an interesting idea. I never thought about that until you said the word inclusive. Like if we actually created the most inclusive workplace for everyone, the ones that needed the least would be so incredibly successful, right? They'd be swinging from the chandelier saying, wow, I got so much time on my hands. What more could I do? And the ones that needed the most flexibility would be so accommodated, but that would be like the new norm, that they would no longer be the exception. It would be like a joy. Okay. So what can everyone do? I think that the more everyone showcases their differences as normal and is not just silent and complies with things that don't work for them, the better it is for everybody. Like how often, I'm 59 years old. I remember when I was an entry-level person in the workplace or middle management even. And, I have 3 kids and, now my kids are 24, 26, and 30, right? But at the time, I remember when my kids had soccer games and hockey games and, all that, how often, we would sneak out of the office, to go to their soccer game and, hope that no one would notice you were missing. Well, that's so stupid. Like, is there any rule book? You think that there's this rule book or the employee handbook that says miss your kid's soccer game. There is no rule book. You just think that it's not okay, right? Mm-hmm. So here's my advice. Don't sneak out. Announce, I'm going to my kid's hockey game. I'm going to my kid's soccer game. I'm going to go to my parents' birthday party or, whatever. And be a role model for others to say the same thing. Cover each other so that it's you're not the exception, or you don't pretend that it's a bad thing. Make it a good thing. Mm-hmm. Put your kids' pictures up at your desk when we go back to physical office. Say to your colleague, I'll cover you tonight so that you can go on a date. Like, don't wait until you're 65 and retired to go on dates. I'll cover you on a date so that you can, go out with your husband for dinner, mm-hmm. right? Like share the load so that you all can have a life too. Yeah. There is such thing as having one life with many dimensions. It doesn't have to be an either or, it can be an and. So, I think that's what you can all do for one another is realize that you can have a full life with many dimensions. It can be an and live life with no regrets. You never want to look back and say, shoulda, woulda, could've. Right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
It's like, don't wait for later in life. Say, God darn it. Like, why was I so silly? Like, I promise you, there is no company handbook that says you should miss the moments that matter. Mm-hmm. No one is ever going to remember the meeting that you missed, but the people in your life will remember the things that you did not prioritize. So, don't wait until it's too late. I just want to say that. So share that on social, listen to those podcasts that give you that advice, do those kinds of things and, join, the groups of women that are the ones that aren't complying to legacy leadership and just following, in the footsteps of those that encourage you to follow the rules, the old school rules, because I can promise you as chief troublemaker that has been well known to break all the rules that make no sense and write the new ones. It is okay. And the new rules of the workplace are good. And they're the ones that should become the new norms because it works and you will be just fine. And I promise you will thrive and leave a new legacy of change.
I love that. And, what you just said really resonated because that is something that we as instructors are always trying to teach the younger generation as well. It's like, think about what really matters in life. And yes, school is important. Yes, work is important. But like you said, you're not going to remember that meeting versus your grandparents' 80th celebration or anniversary. And these are things you can't get back. And I love the combination of, what you talked about in the beginning of that start, which was, creating that new norm and creating a workplace environment that is conducive to allowing for someone who has a soccer game coming up or someone who has family or somebody who has a life where they need to go out and meet someone and find their partner, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that would all work nicely together. It feels a little idealism, but at the same time, why not, right? Why not make that the new norm? And I feel like us as a country, especially in the United States, you look at other countries and they take like a month off. They have a lot more holidays. They have their work-life balance is a little bit different. And I really feel it's very odd, but in America, we overwork, underpaid, obviously, but also I think we work inefficiently. So they make you stay in the office for these 8 hours. But when I talk to a lot of people out in corporate America, they're like, yeah, I really just do like 2 or 3 hours of work. So I feel like there's definitively some room to restructure things where people will work harder, more efficiently and better, especially if you're providing an environment where they're happier and they have a better work-life balance. But how do we get there is the hard part, but all of the ideas.
I always say when you love what you do, it's called passion. When you don't, it's called stress. And, it's really funny because my son, my 24-year-old, when he was, he must have been like 12 or something, I was in the middle of selling my company to a French company, and he was a hockey player. He played on a traveling team, and his coach was Czechoslovakian, and they were going to Czechoslovakia to play in a traveling tournament. And it was the same week that I was in the middle of selling my company. Mm-hmm. And I always told my kids that I would never miss a moment that mattered. And this was a really important moment for him. What was I going to do? I was literally in the middle of selling my company, and it was the same week that my son was going to Czechoslovakia. And so I was going to go to Czechoslovakia. I was not going to miss this important moment for him. And so all of the other parents had their big hockey bags and going to the airport. And I was in my little business suit and my high heels, and I live in Los Angeles. And I had my little suitcase because I don't check luggage. I had my little suitcase. I'm going to the airport. And like, there we are going, and I'm kind of stressed because we were in the middle of documents going back and forth, and we had fax machines at the time, and we were staying in a dormitory. And so we get to Czechoslovakia, and we had a dorm room. It was like $30 a night for this dorm room. So I took one dorm room to sleep in, and I took another dorm room that was my office, and I had a fax machine in it. And by day, the kids would practice. By night was the games. So by day, and I had hangers. I kept going to the parents' rooms. Do you have any hangers? Do you have any hangers? I had little suits in my little suitcase. By day, I would commute to Paris every day. I'd go back and forth to Paris. By night, I would change from my suit to my sweatpants. And I'd be the loudest parent in the arena. Go, Jake! So that my son would see that I was in the stadium. And I would, faxes going back and forth. And I'll tell you something, my son will never forget that I was in Czechoslovakia with him. It was exhausting, but I was fully present. And I sold my company, and I did quite well. And, it worked. And so everything is possible if you believe it to be. There's always a solution. And I'll tell you, so many years later, my son will never forget that I was there. He doesn't remember the blips. I don't remember the blips, and that's what matters, and I'll tell you something, and for everyone tuning in, it is not in a textbook. There is nothing that was in a textbook, because had I read the textbook, the classic textbook, I should have stayed put. I should have done the deal because it was a once in a lifetime deal. But I'll tell you something, that connection with my child and the commitment that I made to him and the commitment that he makes to me, non-negotiable. Most important deal that I ever did was that deal with my son. Mm-hmm. And it all worked itself out. Those are the moments that matter the most. And those are the life lessons that my son will take away, and so will I.
I love that. And a lot of women listening now are thinking, yes, 100%, I'm with you. But then the reality of trying to ask their boss or bringing up the uncomfortable subject of maybe I do know that I'm not getting paid my worth, or so-and-so started the same time I did, and he is now in this position. Those conversations are very uncomfortable. And for women, especially that are not used to being confrontational or haven't had the practice or feel just the fact that they can't lose their job because they're in a situation where they're either a single parent and they're barely making ends meet and they don't want to lose that. What advice would you give to them in terms of how to be able to bring things up to their superiors or their bosses and management, and how to have these uncomfortable conversations?
Okay, so those are a lot of questions packed into one, and there's a lot of different advice for each of those.
Okay.
So had I not have been my own boss in that circumstance, so had I been working for someone and I needed the week to go to Czechoslovakia. So if it, I would have, if I needed the week to go to Czechoslovakia, not negotiating for myself, because that was my own decision. I ran my own company. That was a moment that was non-negotiable. So I would have gone to my boss saying, my son is playing a thing and I need to take a week off to be with my child. If my boss did not understand, then I still would have taken that time, because that was a life decision for me. I would have done that. But I would have said to my boss, I will be working, while I'm there. I won't miss, a work moment. And I would have done the same thing. I would have worked by day. I would have gotten all my work done, and I would have figured out how to make my boss understand that it was important. If not, I would have taken a week unpaid leave, because that was important for me to do for my child. So that's one conversation. How to negotiate your value for a raise is another conversation. So for me, I have never appreciated if someone came to me, and I'm going to be a boss for a minute.
Great.
If someone would have came to me as an employee and said, I deserve a raise, and I went and talked to other companies, or I went and interviewed at other places, and I could make a lot more. And so if you don't give me a raise, I'm going to leave. I would say, go take that other job, because I do not, that really bothers me. Don't threaten me that way. If someone came to me and said, I would really like to get to the next level, and I, could handle more responsibility. What can I do to do that? Please let me know. I would love that, to say, well, if you'd like to, you're doing a wonderful job. If you'd like to move to the next level, here are things. I would love someone to do that with me, and, for me to outline how they're doing, and, et cetera. So I think that's a great way. I'll tell you what I did for myself when I sold my company, which I thought was quite clever. Once again, not textbooky. When I sold my company to this French company, I now was going from a company of 250 employees to now a company of 16,000. And the lawyer negotiating my deal on the other side said, okay, what do you want your compensation to be? I was self-employed before I ran my company. And I said, I don't know. I have three options. I can either go outside and find out what other CEOs selling their company make, which I don't think you want me to do. Or I can go inside of the company that I'm selling to, your company, and ask other leaders what they make, which I don't think you want me to do. Or all I want is for you to pay me the same, not more, not less, as the other board members, because I'm now going to be a board member. Pay me the same. I put it on them. Like, why is it for me to tell you what I should get paid?
Right.
And so she came back to me and she said, okay, you now have the best package of anyone in the company. I said, why is that? She said, well, you put the responsibility on me. And she said, and when I looked at everyone's compensation, there was different salary levels. So I gave you the best salary that, to match, that. And then everyone had different bonus structures. So I gave you the best bonus package. And then I gave you the best equity package. So you now have the best package. I said, great. If someone gets a raise, can you let me know? So I just put it on the company.
Right.
And I thought that was a very fair thing to do, which is what I think companies should be responsible for. Why should employees have to come and negotiate for themselves? A, because we know that women are not great negotiators. If a man is going to negotiate for himself, he's going to always say, can you do better? Can you up the ante? But if you tell a woman, today's your lucky day, I'm going to give you a 20% increase, she's going to say, okay. But we know that women in general are paid on past performance, men on potential. So if you have two equal candidates coming in for a job, we know that men have been in the workplace way longer than women, so they've been getting raises. So if you have a man and a woman coming in, but a woman has been paid less than a man, and the woman comes in and she's making 50,000 and she's getting the job, the person interviewing saying, today's your lucky day, you're going to get a 20% increase. She's going to say, wow, thank you. 20% increase over 50,000. right? Is $10,000 more. A guy comes in, he's making $70,000 coming in. The interviewer is going to say, today's your lucky day. You're going to get a 20% increase.
Right.
Okay. So not only is he getting 20% on 70,000, which is 14,000, he's also going to say, oh, great. How about making that 30% more? So he's already higher.
Right.
So these are big challenges. So why, if it's the same job, should it be up to the woman to say, well, what's he making? It should be the company to make sure equal pay for equal work. So these are the kinds of things that we need to work on, so we don't even make it the employee's issue to have to make that negotiation. So I would give different advice depending on what the issue is, but most importantly, in general, know your value, know your worth. If you don't ask, you'll never know. The worst thing that can happen is you'll get a no. The best thing that can happen is you'll get a yes. But do it not with an attitude. Do it as an opportunity in a very polite way, with also owning it and paying it forward, and not as entitled, but working for it and working hard and always doing more and not just putting your hand out and waiting and watching, but pushing forward and being innovative and doing more than you're supposed to do, challenging yourself.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little about the female quotient itself, and then your work, how you kind of came up with all of this, how it started, and your journey through it?
Oh my goodness. It all started by accident. I always say I went from a moment to a movement. So, I started in the business of market research. I'm the pioneer of online research. Have you ever taken a survey on the internet?
Yes.
So sorry, not sorry. I'm the mother of that invention. So I migrated research from offline to online in a day and age where only wealthy old men with broadband connections were on the internet. So really pioneered something way before its time, which is a whole other story. Built a pretty successful company, was the first really to create it. And then it became a household name. So today, online research is the new norm. At the time, people thought I was crazy. So that was a pretty crazy time. I was the only female CEO, top 25 in my category. It's pretty lonely at the top. It is true. And so, that was a whole other journey. And I always say I follow my heart. So I've had many heartbeat moments. And of course, I always knew I was a very different kind of leader. I always had food. I always had flowers. I always believed in bringing people together. I always thought the best way to innovate was to bring collaborative energy to the table, because that's how you create an ecosystem for change. And then when I sold my company to Ipsos, the third largest research company in the world, once again, I was one of two women on a board of 25. Once again, pretty lonely, especially when I was told there was no room for emotion in the boardroom. So once again, I was part of a boys' club. And of course, when I was told there was no room for emotion in the boardroom after being a very successful CEO, I had two options: agree or do what I did, which was write a speech to thousands. And it was called Bring Emotion to the Boardroom, because I was no longer going to comply to what legacy leadership was. I was going to continue to keep breaking the rules and making that the new norm. And then one day I decided I wanted to go to CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. Heard there was 150,000 people, less than 3% were women. And even though in market research I was well known as a CEO, and I knew a lot of people going into technology, I knew no one. It was pretty intimidating, even for a CEO like me in market research, well-known technology, knowing no one. It was intimidating. So what do? Two choices again. Don't go because you're afraid. Or do what I did, call 4 girlfriends and say, let's go to CES together and walk the floor. And if you know other women, invite them. 24 hours later, 50 women showed up and we walked the floor together. And 2 remarkable things happened. 1, every guy's head turned, like, where the heck did all of you women come from? And, it was just a really remarkable moment. And it's when I coined the phrase, power the pack. A woman alone is power. Collectively, we have impact. And the second remarkable thing was I was surrounded by people just like me, work-life balance, imposter syndrome, getting the best advice from women who have been there, done that. And the Girls Lounge was born. And so I started something called the Girls Lounge, which took on the boys club. The opposite of boy is girl. The opposite of club is lounge. If there's a boys club, now there's a girls lounge. And a lot of women at the time were like, wow, we're not girls, we're women. And I'm like, have you ever heard of a man object to being a boy in the boys club? Never. Mm-hmm. And so the Girls Lounge became a household name. And from 50 women became 350, 350 became 500, 500 became 5,000, 5,000 became 50,000. And next thing you knew, we became a pop-up space at big industry conferences, connecting women across every industry all over the world. And then the Girls Lounge, after we connected women to support other women, I turned that into a quality lounge so that men would start coming. And it was just a safe space for thought leadership at big industry conferences, of which today we do over 70 pop-ups at big industry conferences, from CES for technology to Cannes Lions for media to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland for world leaders. We are the destination for equality at the largest conferences around the globe. And then the Equality Lounge laddered up to the female quotient. First came the intelligence quotient, IQ. Then came the emotional quotient, EQ. Now comes the female quotient, FQ. When you add more women to any equation, there's a return on equality. And so we are now in the business of equality, changing the equation and closing the gap. And that's what we do.
Wow, that is quite a journey. I mean, just the pioneering of so many things throughout your journey is really remarkable. I know your brain is probably always working, always going. Do you have something that you haven't checked off that list yet? Obviously, we have work to do with the undertaking that you have, but it feels like you are just constantly kind of, making your mark in so many different areas.
I'm so excited about so many things. I mean, we are really about three core things. One is being coalition collaborators, bringing the industry to work together, because as we started this conversation, we go further faster when we go together. So bringing the industry, bringing Fortune 500 conscious leaders together to close the gaps. We can't close them alone. We got to close them together, period. So that's what we do in equality lounges at conferences, having this thought leadership where, we have a finite amount of money. If we could collate, really curate the conversation, but also collate our finances to closing the gaps, we can really, create these safe spaces in the workplace to close the parity policy pipeline gaps, number one. Secondly, really creating the network of networks, women supporting other women. And we do this through creating the global packs. So our network of women, we have, 50,000 strong, moving to 150,000 women in the workplace all over the globe across 100 countries, bringing women together. People call it the network of networks, women supporting other women across every industry, across 100 countries. We do that through global pack dinner parties, bringing women around the world, paying it forward to other women, which is amazing. And soon we will be hosting the largest global conversation, a global forum with topics that matter a lot around the care economy, as we started with feminist leadership and also the digital divide, giving every woman around the world access to the internet to be able to join the conversation, but also have local conversation, in local communities as well, which will be quite exciting. And giving women also the opportunity to self-organize their own conversations, which will be amazing. And then really, the tools for conscious leaders inside of companies to be aware of their gaps, because it starts with awareness, and then the information on how to close the gaps, because it's really not that hard. It really just takes being conscious. The will, when there's a will, there's a way. And so, it's really giving people the solutions to do the right thing. So we have work to do, but we're willing to go there. So as long as we hold hands and go together and go with being comfortable, being uncomfortable, we absolutely can close those gaps way sooner than 99.5 years, way sooner than 257 years.
I'm hoping so. Can you talk a little bit more extensively so our listeners can really understand? You were pretty clear on the care economy and the other core areas. You said the digital divide. Can you kind of talk about how one, like a little more in depth on what that is, and then what ways that you're actually taking to actually bridge that gap?
Digital divide, internet access. I mean, really, that really is the most important thing for education. You know, education is so incredibly important, you know, for women all over the world. Educate, you know, a girl, you educate a family. And I think that that is so incredibly important. And for the care economy, it is about flexibility, because we know that with flexibility and work from home will go a long way to getting paid to be able to work. So those are very important dynamics, because so many women are opting out of work right now because they can't, quote unquote, do it all. So that is so important. And then feminist leadership, really important to help women get into the workforce, but also stay in the workforce and to rise to leadership, because where we see the greatest fall off is in middle management, because it is all about the care economy. So they all kind of go together.
Right. And then you have these pop-ups at these conferences. Can you kind of take me through what it's like to be there? It sounds really intense, but also fun and like a lot of people. And I know the pandemic must have put a kind of a damper on this last year of conferences and things like that. But I've been to different conferences of all sorts, and I'm so curious about this, the Girls Lounge and how it's evolved and what it's kind of like to be there. Can you kind of paint that picture for us?
Well, so, pre-COVID, we were doing about 70 pop-ups a year. Since COVID, the equality conversation never stops. And we always want to make sure that we have the conversations that need to happen, but also the actions that need to take place. So nothing can ever stop. These conversations need to keep going. The collaboration needs to keep going. And they are safe spaces, meaning they're places where it is all about relationships. The more you spend time with people, the more trust, the more transparency, that's when change really happens. And so we've hosted over 600 lounges, virtual lounges, since COVID, which is really quite remarkable. The most amazing thing that's happened is we've become so much more global as a result of COVID. So when we go back to real life experiences, we will be in real life. We will also be in virtual life. So we will be broadcasting out, which has been amazing, and in audio life. So we will be multicasting moving forward, which is an amazing new opportunity that has emerged as a result of COVID. So there's always a silver lining.
There is.
But at events, it's pretty remarkable. We do this great pop-up space where everyone is welcome. So it's not badge only. Anyone is welcome to come. And it's just a space where people say hello to people. It's not based on your title or based on what company. You discover people. You're curious. Hey, how are you? Who are you? What do you do? What's on your mind? What are you thinking about? And next thing you know, over food and drink and conversation, and there's always speakers and topics and questions, and everyone is available and accessible to everyone else. There's no one off limits, and it's not about the press in your face. It's just about an open forum of conversation and engagement. And then in another corner, there'll be some interviewing. And in another corner, there'll be headshots. And in another corner, you'll see girls in STEM making prosthetic arms and legs. And you'll be learning about 3D printing. And in another area, you'll see like amazing art on a wall where you'll discover women that have gone to space and what their journeys are. Or in another area, you'll be getting coaching on financial literacy, or there's just different things happening all over the place.
Wow.
And somewhere else there might be hair and makeup. Someone is going to go on stage and she wants to feel good, and somewhere else someone will be rehearsing their speech, or other women that are just doing deals with someone else, and plenty of men hanging out. It's just a great space of connection, collaboration, and conversation.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a picture. It seems like almost like a circus of events. So many different things going on. I love that.
And people just find their way, and everyone feels comfortable, and everyone feels welcome, and no one feels alone. So, you come in where you might not know anyone, because when you go to a big conference of 150,000 people, you're lost. You come to our lounge, which is just like a microcosm of the big conference, and you leave with friends. And next thing you know, you feel comfortable at the conference because you now have buddies. Mm-hmm. And then when you have a confidence circle, you then meet other people because you have people that you're with. And then you attract other people. And all of a sudden, like in Cannes on the Quotient, it's like, hey. And then someone's like, who's that? And everyone, then you become Miss Popular. and that confidence is what, gives you that boost to do more business, right? And so that all starts in the lounge.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So it's really interesting because, of course, we get to see the Shelley today who has achieved so much and is now creating this safe space and all of these opportunities for so many other women and really paving the way. And also, I know you do mentorship. There's a plethora of things that you do. But was there a time when that kind of drove you to that point? Was there a time when, I know you said it was lonely at the top, but I mean, even getting there, it seems like you've always been very confident and a go-getter, but did you have experiences that has been in the back of your mind as you go to create safe space because maybe you didn't feel like you were in one, or that you were alone and really felt like, there wasn't anyone you could speak to? It feels like you're creating this amazing, I don't want to call it the circus of events, but this, the lounge where you're providing an opportunity maybe that you wish you had at that time. Was there something that kind of drove you to that when maybe in the beginning, or were there experiences that were, of course, more negative? I know it feels, it's hard to believe because seeing you now, I can't even imagine that you would ever be taken advantage of or put in a position where, you were put down and you didn't stand up for yourself. But I mean, the journey must have not been easy.
No, first of all, I have so many of those stories. That's a whole other podcast in and of itself. But the truth is, it did start, one year when I wanted to go to Cannes Lions, and I was a researcher, and market researchers are the bottom of the totem pole. Mm-hmm. They really are the bottom of the jungle. When you look at the lion is the king, researchers are the bottom of the totem pole. Put me in a research conference and researchers with researchers are comfortable, but researchers in media are the bottom of the food chain, literally.
Okay.
But I wanted to bring research into media, but to go into media, not knowing anyone, to, I don't even know how many people show up at Cannes Lions. And so I remember putting myself in this really uncomfortable situation. I bought a badge, which was really expensive. I didn't know a single person. And I show up and I went to like the main session, sitting by myself, and going to the opening dinner, which like the tourists go to, sitting at a table with strangers. And I remember walking back to my room on the Quotient, knowing no one invited me to any parties, and thinking to myself, God, this is so lonely. I'm never going to break into this industry. You go to a cocktail party, who's going to introduce themselves? I'm not going to break into someone's circle and say, hey, I'm a researcher. I need to know you. Like, I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. And so then comes CES. And that was my thought. I'm not going to do the same thing there. It was so boring and lonely and uneventful. And that's when I had the thought, I'm going to invite a few other women because I don't want to go by myself. Mm-hmm. And that's why I did that. And the thought was, I don't want other women to feel the same as I did. And so if I could create this opportunity to have space for other women to meet other women, they don't have to be me. They don't have to have that lonely feeling that I felt. And then the same thing happened again when I got invited to the World Economic Forum, Davos, Switzerland. Mm-hmm. I already had the Girls Lounge, but a lot of women in finance were like, the Girls Lounge, we're not girls, we're women. And so when I got invited to the World Economic Forum, like, oh my God, the most powerful conference in the world. I'm thinking, wow, we've arrived. The little girls' lounge, which was this little thing at the time, this is a moment of moments. but it was going to cost me $250,000 to set up a lounge there.
Wow.
We had to use their resources and stuff. And it was a lot of money for the girls' lounge. And I'm thinking, wow, this is a big move. And the invitation that I got was as follows. We want to bring the girls' lounge to the World Economic Forum, but you might not feel welcome. That was my invitation. You might not feel welcome. Once again.
Yeah.
And I thought about it. And once again, two choices. We were 2 years old maybe at the time. Oh, I don't want to go to a place I don't feel welcome. Mm-hmm. Or, okay, I need to get uncomfortable again. Time for me to get uncomfortable again. And I remember the voice in my head, the imposter syndrome. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm not qualified. Okay, shut that voice up in your head. Okay, I'm coming. So I silently shut the voice up, and what came out of my mouth was, okay, I'm coming. And then, of course, I called Talia, the president of my company. I'm like, we need to come up with $250,000. We're not going to feel welcome, but we're going. And so I called my girlfriend, Jackie, who was the COO of Bloomberg. I'm like, Jackie, you got to go with me. You're going to validate us. It's going to be good if Bloomberg comes with us. We're going to go together. And so we went. She held my hand. She goes, Shelley, I'm coming with you. And we went together. And today, 6 years later, we are the destination for equality at the World Economic Forum. And now we spend $2 million a year to go. And, but it was a really big leap of faith. And it was so scary, but we did it. And, it's like what my mother always tells me, the first time you do something, it's like wearing a new pair of shoes. You put them on, especially high heels, and it pinches. But the more you wear them, the more comfortable you get. And I mean, I'm still shivering from that moment. It was so scary and so intimidating. And people say to me, gosh, you don't get scared. Yes, I do. I'm still shivering from that moment. I still feel it like it was yesterday. But you know what? Jackie was right by my side. She said, I am going with you. I will be right. And she was. And Jackie, I thank her if she said yes. She says, I'm coming with you. And she was. It was really amazing.
Wow. And just out of curiosity, when you were there, did you feel welcome, or was it as bad as you thought it was going to be? And
no one welcomed us, but we made ourselves welcome. We had each other. Like, who cared?
And you brought your own crew. That's the point, right?
And posse. And that is the power of girlfriends. That's the power of the pack. Mm-hmm. We had each other, and we showed up, and and next thing you know, people came, and then more people came, and we had this little tiny shack. And now we have a 2-story glass house. And, it was remarkable.
Wow. That is amazing. I would definitely love to see it all one day. So during this conversation, I know we're running on time and you have a hard stop today, so I won't take too much more of your time, but it's really been interesting because I definitively work in a male-dominated world like everybody else, but specifically in Chinese martial arts, there is actually no female word for teacher for me. So I'm a sifu. And it is by definition a male term. It means like father teacher. It's specifically male. So it's very interesting because in this very thousands of years old traditional, Chinese art form that I'm trying to preserve, at the same time, I'm working out of a dynamic where there's not even a word for me, right? But what I have done, and what other women who are in my field have done, is now made it to where some people don't even know that, right? So generations later, they just think the word sifu means kung fu teacher. But those people who read Chinese or know, of course, they'll see it's it's a male term. So I think there's something very powerful in what you shared at the beginning with, even the word feminism and adding the MEN and taking words and educating people to know that it doesn't mean what it always had to mean. Like, we can change that dynamic. So now looking forward, as we've brought, Chinese culture to the United States, it's not known as only men are allowed to be kung fu teachers. It's anyone can be a kung fu teacher. And that term is no longer a male term. It is now defined by who the teacher is, right? But it's so interesting because I was just thinking, wow, that's funny, because I always try to teach my students about the tradition, I'm like, all right, so before there was women weren't even allowed to learn Kung Fu. So it's fascinating because I feel like we can apply that to all of the things that we've been talking about today with how we can change that dynamic.
You know how you change the dynamic, though? Because I'm the co-founder of See Her. If you can see her, you can
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that.
You change it with image. And so the more you start populating Google with images, then that is how, because it's only because Kung Fu teachers were men. Mm-hmm. It's not the word, it's the image. So the more you start putting Kung Fu teachers with female images, then the word will evolve. Mm-hmm. If you keep saying that Kung Fu teachers are men, then that's what it shall be. But if you say Kung Fu teachers, Sifu is teacher, not male teacher. Sifu is a Kung Fu teacher, then Sifu is teacher. Mm-hmm. And so start putting the images of Kung Fu teacher. So you can say Kung Fu teachers used to be men by profession, mm-hmm. but more and more women are now Kung Fu teachers. So Sifu is the word for teacher. And now more women are becoming teachers, right? Mm-hmm. So start putting into Google images, all of you teachers, start populating rapidly. You'll change the algorithm. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, Sifu will start showing female teachers.
I love it. I love it. And that's actually part of why I kept my Sifu title in my podcast name, in all my social media. And I was just, I wanted to really embrace it instead of trying to find a new word or I'm like, I think we have the power to, like you said, redefine and to evolve.
The power's in your hands. And you should go to all of the Kung Fu female teachers and have them start calling themselves Sifu.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Send them all a note and say, call yourself Sifu. And that's how you will change the algorithm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent advice. I love it. So I know that you have a hard stop. So I would love at some point to hear some of those other stories about, the grit of the ground up and your journey, because Kung Fu also means, like, there's a definition for that, meaning hard work. And it is something that I have been fortunate to live my life by, but seeing you're also an amazing Kung Fu practitioner, because you are obviously a hard worker and have really paved the way for so many people, not just women, but men as well, because I think learning about all of these issues is very important for us to just exist as a society together peacefully and in harmony. So thank you for all the work you're doing. Is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners before we kind of wrap up? I will, of course, link everything here, and hopefully one day we'll meet in person and I'll get to see the 2-story glass building and experience it.
I was thinking I would love for you to teach us to do
like a seminar.
I'd like for you to teach us. I'd like for you to be a Sifu for us. Like, teach us.
Oh my goodness, that would be amazing.
Where are you based?
I'm in Orlando, Florida.
Oh, in Orlando, mm-hmm. Because we have. I'm wondering if Kung Fu. We have a big Asia dinner coming up.
Oh, okay.
I'm wondering if we do a Kung Fu demo at our dinner. It's virtual.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I have a professional team and we do shows. We work with, Disney a lot. Like we have a longstanding relationship. So it's highly probable we can absolutely talk after we wrap up here on this. So
let's discuss. I want to do something really fun.
Yes. We do lots of fun things. So
let's do that. Okay. Let's discuss.
All right.
Okay.
We'll discuss. But for now, everyone, the amazing Shelley Zalis, thank you so much for joining me today. And of course, the Female Quotient, we will post this and hopefully you'll be able to share the podcast with others as well. But I really enjoyed our conversation and I always learn so much from them. But I love the work you're doing and I appreciate it. Thank you for paving the way.
So I'll give you your closing words because Sarah Jessica Parker says this, and I'm obsessed with her. In one of her shows, she says, trying to be a man is a waste of a woman. So remember that. Be yourself because everyone else is taken, says Oscar Wilde. And it is so true. Own your femininity. It is so incredibly important. And you are a rock star. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much fun.
All right. Until next time. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to The Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.